Hello and welcome to the Home Assistant podcast. My name's Phil. Joining me as usual, I've got Rohan. Good morning.
Hey, morning.
All right. As usual, this episode of the Home Assistant podcast is sponsored by Home Assistant Cloud by Nabukasa. Easily access your local Home Assistant instance remotely for a small monthly fee that supports the Home Assistant and the ESP Home projects. Configuration is done via the user interface, so no fiddling with router settings, SSL certificates, or any YAML. Right, Rohan, 2023.4, so April release is here. Couple of things, first of all, before we get into the Home Assistant release, I do want to just quickly touch on the Android app update, so the 2023.3 Android app that came out. So a couple of really big things here. First of all, multiple server support is now available on the Android app. So apparently it's like one of the biggest feature requests that people have been asking for. I'm interested. Are you still using multiple instances of Home Assistant in your setup?
No. I technically I have a dev one that's like unplugged somewhere.
Yep.
Just on a Raspberry Pi, just in case I want to, I don't know, play with something or do something like that. I think outside of the first time when I set it up, being like, hey, I need a dev instance. I think that's the last time I actually looked at it.
Yeah.
But this I do know of several people. Well, Phil, you were running like 3 instances at one point, weren't you? In your
Absolutely.
old place? I don't know if you still are.
Yeah. No, because you actually got me onto the remote Home Assistant custom add-on that's in the Hack store. And I was running it, at 1.3. I had segregated my integrations, so that any integration that relied on the cloud went through one instance, so that, because when you're rebooting, back in the old days of Home Assistant, rebooting Home Assistant all the time for configuration changes, any cloud reliant integrations would make Home Assistant slow to load. Now that's not really an issue. Like, integrations don't really block Home Assistant from starting. I've gone back to one instance.
It's I think Home Assistant's come such a long way in that sense, and even with all the performance stuff, even in this release, right? Like, that we'll talk about in a little bit. It is pretty significant how much performance improvement Home Assistant has had since, like, well, at least since I started using it, right? And which is forever ago now, and it has come a very, very, very long way. So,
but this is going to be good for people that have, maybe a parent's house, or you've got like a holiday house, a second home somewhere that you're running 2 instances of Home Assistant on. Now it's going to be easier to switch between those two via Android. I'm hoping that'll come to Apple at some point as well. But for the moment,
it's in iOS, so you can actually.
It already is it?
Yeah. So we were actually talking about this, and Frank was showing how in iOS, if you 3-finger swipe up, you'll get the list, or you can just swipe through with 3 fingers through, like, left or right to go through different servers. So it actually exists today.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, there you go. And I'm really shocked about this one. So I really did some Google, because I wasn't sure if this was like an April Fool's joke or something. But the Home Assistant Android companion app is now available for Windows 11 via the Amazon App Store, which Amazon really threw me. I'm like, this has got to be an April Fool's joke. But apparently it's there. So Windows does not always provide the correct information about the app, and it may shut down in the background. But apparently if you're running Windows 11 on a supported device, you can sideload somehow the Home Assistant Android app and then expose your computer as a mobile device to Home Assistant that way. So
Gotta love it.
There you go. Yeah, it sounds a bit beta-ish, a bit buggy, very on the edge at the moment. So if you're expecting something mission critical, maybe not just yet.
Yeah. Any sensor with a location attached will also show up for navigation now using Android Auto, which is pretty cool. So that means I can say, like, hey, you know what, I don't know, let's say my wife is stuck on the road somewhere and her phone already has Home Assistant, which it does. I can say, okay, let's navigate me here. Not that I have Android Auto or an Android device, but that's still pretty cool. But just
Android Auto integration, like the updates they've done to Android Auto, is I love being able to just get home, tap, unlock the front door, and so that when I get out of the car, the door's unlocked. Don't have to get home,
which is super
put my
cool.
pin in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's
Or if I
I
forgot
actually saw
to
this.
lock the house, right? Like
Yeah, as
while
you
I'm on the
leave,
road,
just
lock it.
hey, or if you can have a actionable notification or something like that and say, hey, you forgot to lock it. Do you want to lock it or
Ooh,
kind of thing? Or can you do
that's a good
actionable
idea.
in Android? I think you
I
can.
don't know.
I
So
thought you could.
in Android Auto, you can definitely have like notifications, depending on if the app supports, like Discord, WebEx, Slack. They've all got Android Auto apps, right? And so when I
Hmm.
get a message on WhatsApp or something, like I can see the message there as an action.
Yep.
I don't know if Home Assistant has that. I should test. I mean, yeah, I don't think it does, to be honest,
You
because
can
it's
you can
generally
definitely have
something
it
you have to
on.
reply with a voice.
Yeah, because you can do it on Android, like standard Android. But
Yeah,
I'm
definitely. You
assuming
can do it
it
as
would
an
have
Android. I
gotten
don't know if there's actionable
ported into auto, but
notifications.
yeah.
Yeah, I don't think so. I'd have to. I haven't played around with the
I,
new Android Auto UI enough to fully understand it yet.
Yeah, it's yeah, it's I was watching, I forget whose video it was that I was watching, but I was watching a video I think last night or the night before, and I was seeing it was an Android phone, whatever. Again, I've got an iOS device, right? I've got an iPhone, and somebody had basically pinned their garage door open close on their as part of like their like top bar widgets thing, uh outside of Home Assistant, and I was like, oh, that's nice, because for me, like, you can do that
Mm,
in iOS, but you have to build it as a widget, and then which then has to, like, there's a whole like process,
thing
right?
you have to do,
Whereas
yeah.
I'd rather
This
just
is where
have the
Rosemary
button,
comes
press
out
it.
with a whole podcast episode on how to do it and all that,
Yeah,
right? Like,
yeah.
yeah.
I mean, hey, listen, if someone's got a great, easy way of doing it, send it, because I know I can build a widget, and I actually went down that route. I got to the point of naming it, and then I was like, oh, this is too much effort. I'm not doing this. I'll just use Siri and say, open the garage door, or whatever, right? So,
Yeah,
which is
that's
what I
it.
do today now. So,
So now, if you're using Android Wear, the Assist, which is in part of Home Assistant Zero the Voice, is only a tap away via a watch face complication. So you can actually put a little, similar to what you're just discussing, Rohan, put a little widget on
yeah.
your Android Wear device, tap that button, and it will launch a voice prompt. So then you can start talking to your Home Assistant assistant in your home. There you go.
For assistance. Yeah. Um,
Yeah.
Ear the Voice Chapter 2 is coming. So April 27th, the Home Assistant team will be hosting a live stream on the Home Assistant YouTube channel. Check it out. It's going to be talking about, some of the stuff where, so a while ago we had Chapter 1, which basically said, hey, we're introducing things like native voice integration into Home Assistant, things like that. Chapter 2 is essentially, as the name would suggest, taking that a next step, a little bit further, and seeing where you can go. So I'm pretty stoked to see that. I have you used any of the voice functions, Phil, in Home Assistant?
Not the voice. I've played around with the assistant, like the text-based chat assistant. Things like I've thought about trying to integrate, OpenAI, or ChatGPT into it, but at the moment, it's simplicity
It's
for me,
not going
right?
to do a
It's
whole lot.
still
It's not
no,
doing a lot for you. It's
simplicity, and it's the who is right there in all my rooms, right? I just yell out to her to do something,
yeah.
and there she is.
Well, I mean, the other thing too is, even when you do integrate like ChatGPT or something like that, it's because that is there, right? You can actually
Yeah.
do that today, but it's not going to let you control your house stuff. You can be like, hey, what's the best cookie recipe, right? Like, it'll help you in that sense, right? I'm not saying that there's no value in that. There might be some value in that, but it's not going to be like, hey, turn on my lights, and lights are going to go on, right? It's that's just not the model that um, that that's built yet for this. Maybe
Mm.
down the road, who knows? Be like, hey, I'm coming home, and based on a whole bunch of different metrics, it can say, okay, the weather is this, the temperature outside is this, and whatever, the grass is green, and whatever, based on that, it can make decisions to say turn on and off certain things how you like it, kind of thing. um that's not there today. even remotely.
For me, I love the initiative of the voice, and I think the Home Assistant team and Nabocast team touched on this in their latest Building the Open Home newsletter. A lot of companies,
Yeah.
like Google, Amazon, are now saying, "Well, hang on, running all these voice assistants is expensive, and they don't make as much money. Like,
Yeah.
what? How do we monetize these things, right?" Um, and we have discussed many a product test, becoming paperweights overnight, right? So, for that reason, I'm excited for the voice, for there to be another player, right? And especially a local player. I think
Yeah.
we need that in the smart home space. What I'm really excited for from the Home Assistant perspective, though, is the brains that are needed for the voice assistants. So, for example, like the text stuff, right? And now with integrations like OpenAI, ChatGPT, having the ability to query the smart home, which there are some things already in there, like how many lights are on, what areas are currently occupied, right? Being able to take that to the next level with a chat GPT assistant, can I then ask my home assistant instance, what's my average electricity spend per day for the dishwasher? Or
Yeah.
and taking it to that level, or how much did I how many hours was this light on last month,
Yeah.
and being able to query my home in a natural language way. So then I can say, okay, well, actually, my washing machine cost me this much. Maybe I can try and work on getting that down.
Yeah, or even again, what I would again, this I think we're getting so far away from what we're supposed to be talking about.
Yeah.
But to me, what would be cool is again, if you do have like the energy integrations and you have your cost of energy and stuff like that in there, instead of me having to go in, because again, I know a lot of people do this today where they're like, hey, you know what? Right now is actually my cheapest hour for running whatever I want to do is turn on everything, run everything, turn on the dishwasher, turn on the washing machine, the dryer, whatever, right? Like
Yeah, absolutely.
instead of that, I'd love to see where that automation gets built automatically, right? Where I don't have to go in. So, for example, like our provider, my energy provider will change the prices. I think they do it every season, something like that, right? Or they'll update their prices, whatever. And based on that, like I would love for it to be able to go in and just deal with that,
Yeah.
right? You go figure out the prices based on that. You say, okay, you know what? I'm actually going to turn on the lights a little later today because it's based on the time of day, blah blah blah.
Yep.
Where the sun is based on, and again, some of this we can do today, but it's still a manual process where I have to go in and put that logic in, right? I'm just at the point where I just don't care to do that right now. I care to do it. I care to do it. I do want it, but I just don't. It's a lot of not a lot of thinking, but it's a lot of logic mapping and being like, okay, this has to work this way. This has to work this way. Which, in fairness, I do like doing, but I'd rather just you know
Sometimes
and
you
it
just
work,
want it
right?
there,
I
right?
clap twice.
It,
Yeah.
it sounds like you're asking for like Amazon hunches, like the Amazon Echo hunches, but
Mhm.
the net version 2 of that locally in Home Assistant, essentially, where Amazon Echo can say, all right, generally, you always turn the light off at this time, so I can do that for you automatically and build out automations that way.
Yeah, yeah. Or it's like, hey, we've detected that, your doorbell had, based on facial recognition, hey, this is your friend Phil that's come over.
Yep.
And, okay, Phil actually likes, every time he comes over, he actually stays over. So we're just going to assume, when you say goodnight,
Activate guest
don't turn
mode.
off
Yeah.
his lights and stuff like that, right? In the guest bedroom and stuff like that. So that kind of stuff is super cool because right now it's like, hey, turn on guest mode. Because I have a lot of that stuff today,
Mm.
right? But I have to say, hey, what's your face? Go turn on guest mode, right? And
Yeah.
then all of that stuff will kick off, right? I don't know. I get excited when we think about this kind of stuff, but I also know that's not really near term always, right? So,
No,
but
no, I don't think
but
so.
the other question is how much like what does that mean from a device perspective, right? Like, is that something where now I'm going to need a TPU hooked up to my, not that I have it today, but my Home Assistant
Mm.
Yellow or something like that, right? So, um, or just to my system, whatever I'm running it on, right? Because if I'm running it on our little Raspberry Pi, that's nowhere even close to being able to do that, right? Unless I have something like a Google Coral plugged into it that can do some of those pieces, right? The machine learning pieces and stuff. But
I think that's where we want to head to. A little bit of a deviation from the Year of the Voice, Chapter 2. Check it out. April, 27th?
Yes, just a little.
That's Phil and Rohan's musings of where we want the smart home to be.
But before you move on, I do just, again, entirely personally, I am curious as to what others think about this kind of stuff too. So if you're on YouTube, put it on the comments, or just email us feedback@haspodcast.io. Again, this is just something I personally am interested in, so I'd love to know your thoughts on it too.
Absolutely.
Or am I just going way down the wrong path and being too creepy?
Well, we'll see how many people respond to you.
Yeah.
All right. Supervisor security vulnerability. All right. So this is probably a serious one now. There was a security vulnerability announced this month or last month, in March 2023. So it affected the Home Assistant Blue and Home Assistant Yellow. It's anything using the supervisor, essentially, which is another service that runs or makes sure that Home Assistant OS and all the hardware is running properly. So it doesn't affect if you're using the Docker container or if you have got Home Assistant installed manually another way, you're fine there. So the issue allowed an attacker to remotely bypass the authentication and interact directly with the supervisor API. So this gave the attacker access to install Home Assistant updates and manage add-ons and backups. So essentially someone could, if they wanted to delete all your backups or install a nasty add-on if one existed. There is an update released, so make sure you're running at least the supervisor version 2023.031. You can go into the Home Assistant About page in your instance and just verify that you're running that version. If you can't upgrade for any reason, maybe you're stuck on an older version for a legacy integration, it's advised that you disable remote access for the time being, just in case. At the moment, they're not sure if this has been exploited. They were just made aware of it and getting it out there that there was a vulnerability. They've patched it. So yeah, takes.
Yeah, and this affects every previous version of Supervisor since its introduction, right? So even if you're running on some really, really, really old version, and you think, hey, maybe my version is too old to be affected by this. That's not the case. You're affected if you're running a supervised version of Home Assistant.
Yeah, and bloody Mark Watt from Mark Watt Tech got me good on April Fool's with a tweet saying that's why he was leaving Home Assistant. I had a heart attack for a minute there. I was like, "You're kidding me? This guy leaving Home Assistant? No way." So thanks, Mark, for that.
Yeah, that's right.
All right, 2023.4. Take it away, Rohan. Go for it.
Yeah. There's actually a lot of stuff that came in from a feature perspective, and a lot of it is actually UI based. And for me, it couldn't be more timely, which again, this entire podcast is about me. So I'm going to talk about that. No, kidding. There's a lot of cool new dialogues that have come in. So for example, the alarm control panel, covers, and fans all get new dialogues. So for the last little bit, they've been updating slowly the dialogues. Because again, even since Lovelace was released, they didn't really do any updates to the UI. It was just kind of how the UI was structured kind of changed, but not the actual dialogues and stuff like that. So like when you click into it, like if I click into a sensor, what pops up, right? So it's that same old kind of, just again, it's a dated interface, right? So what they're doing is they're going through updating a lot of those kind of pieces. The one I'm really excited for, and I talked about this a little bit last time, I think in the last release episode, which should have been 2023.2 or .3. I talked about, I'm getting some SwitchBot tilts. So again, the little motors for adjusting shades and stuff like that, right? So I've got blinds next to me on the left of me here, and it couldn't be more timely. They updated that UI, and it's actually really slick, because before it was kind of just like you look at it and it's just covers, right? So it's like go up, go down. But now if it's a tilt based value, right? So in my case, I'm not opening and closing the curtains. I'm tilting it open or shut.
Nice.
So even the UI actually follows through with that, and it is actually really neat. Again, something I just got really excited for. The alarm control panel was a lot nicer too. So basically, you've got a little strip, and it says like, okay, like what do you want? Do you want to arm, disarm, home, away, whatever it is? So you click on a mode, and then a button pops up. Before it was kind of clanky with like just the way the numbers pop up and stuff like that. I just think it's a lot nicer of an interface. So I was actually very excited for that. Not that I even use the alarm card, but I just thought it was cool. So I was excited for the people that do use it.
Yeah, the alarm control. I must admit, I saw that one because I heavily use the alarm control panel just through home. Like I don't have an actual physical alarm panel. Like Home Assistant is my alarm control panel.
Your tablet or something. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, just so Home is like, if it's armed away, then no one's home, right? Like it's just an easy way to set presence for the house. But yeah, having the ability to have that in Lovelace. I haven't upgraded the card yet, but I'm interested to see how it's going to handle like pin codes and all that as well. So yeah, really.
Yeah,
really like
the demo I saw looked really nice, and it looks like it works really well.
Yeah, that's good.
And then extending onto that, like with fans and stuff like that. If you don't mind, I'll do the next one too because it's kind of related.
Please.
In the tile card, when you update your tile card too, it's kind of similar to like the mushroom cards where you can actually set see and set the status of like a fan or something like that in the card itself, right? So it is actually really nice in terms of how they integrated it and what it looks like. It is just I think that this is a huge improvement. So in the little tile itself, you can actually, like for a fan, for example, you can get like 1, 2, 3, 4. So you can just tap on the little or off and like level 1, 2, 3 or whatever it is, right? You can tap on that and it'll automatically adjust it. Or if you have a percentage, you'll just get on your tile itself, you'll get the slider. So you can just set, hey, I want to set it to 30%, right? Fan speed, whatever it is. So yeah, it's actually very, very nicely done. If there's 4 speeds or less, it'll show you buttons. Otherwise, it'll show you a slider effectively for this for the fans, and I think the different things may have different quirks like that, which is I call it a quirk, but it's actually kind of nice.
Nice.
Thought yeah.
I'm a big fan of the mushroom cards, and I love seeing like these are coming into part of the core cards now. So yeah, some great little updates there. All right. It's actually good that we did this way because I'm really excited about the next couple of ones. I'm going to talk about these. So big shout out to David Pohl, who's done some awesome work in templates this release. So the first one he's introduced is template macros. So if you are a heavy Ginger template creator, you'll know that if you need to do a standard Ginger template across multiple sensors, you would have to have copy and paste Ginger code everywhere. There is now the ability to create a macro that can be used globally in Home Assistant, and that resides in the custom templates folder. So yeah, you can then call those macros. So you can create a function that can check the status of something if you need to, and return in a certain way. There's a whole bunch of use cases that you can do this for. I think it's very powerful. So, for example, back in the old days, I had my Java's good morning, spiel that would come out. I can now you have that not as text on my Lovelace dashboard, and also spat out to my speakers as I walk into a room, based on a global macro. Right. Previously, I would have to copy and paste and make sure everything aligned and would just be messy. But now
or on the other hand, if you made one change, you have to make sure you remember to make that change everywhere, right?
Yep.
So
and that goes same with there's a whole bunch of stuff that you could do that with. So really excited to see what other people come up with. I'm hoping maybe there'll be a forum topic somewhere where people can share some cool template macros that they've created as well. This will be a good opportunity for people to share around what they're doing with templates. how they can, sharing is caring, right? So if you've got some cool template stuff you want to share around, please post it around and put it as a macro out for everyone. So on that, so there's been some more templating love as well. Relative time and today at will now update once per minute. Previously, I think they only updated based on when the underlying sensor updated, so that's good. There's also a new is hidden entity function, which is also added by David, which can tell if an entity has been marked as hidden in the UI. So that way, if you want to, for example, have a list of devices on your Lovelace show up, and then if have it configurable by a user, if they go in and hide that, it won't be shown in that macro. There's also a new areas function, which returns a list of all the areas you have. Previously, that wasn't available in your templates. And finally, if you want to check if an entity has a value, so it's not in unavailable or unknown state, there is a new has value function. There you go, some cool updates.
So there's actually one more thing that I thought was awesome, which is if you have like for loops and stuff like that, you can actually break and continue loops in the templates too, right? So which I thought was great. So just like in Python, whatever, it can make your scripts a little more efficient if you have that, right? Which is nice.
That's cool.
Yeah. Also, there's a ton of database optimizations in this. Like again, the gist of it is it's faster, smaller. Like they're doing a lot of deduplication and stuff like that, a lot more deduplication and stuff like that. So you have a smaller database size, improved IO optimizations, quicker startup, better response times. Like it's just all of that stuff. Again, if you want the details, it's in the release notes. But it was actually interesting because when we were talking about this in the creators call, I was chatting with Paulus and Frank and the rest of the creators on there, and one of the things that I asked was, I'm like, okay, so and they were talking about how good SQLite's gotten with lately with these releases and stuff, right? Because again, before the problem was, especially if you're running it off of a SD card, things like that, you had like SD cards wearing out and stuff like that. Between the changes that have been made in the last, let's call it year, and then in terms of like, hey, how do we not slow down writes, but how do we do less writes and stuff like that? Between the deduplication, between all of that stuff, they were actually saying, like Paulus was actually saying, I think it was like, hey, you know what? He would actually prefer SQLite over using like a MariaDB or stuff like that, just to the point they've gotten to the optimizations and stuff, right? So and they're saying even size wise, like it's probably around like 40% smaller because of a lot of the dedupe stuff they do and a lot of the other techniques. And they don't store everything in there anymore either, right? So before you'd store like everything, including like, hey, what's the weather today? What's the weather? Blah blah blah. Like that's stuff you can reference after. You don't need that in your recorder in your SQL. So you can actually go through and they don't need to keep that, or like sun positions for the last month. Like if you care, fine, you can find a way to pull it out, but you don't necessarily for let's call it 99% of the people probably don't need to retain that, right? So that kind of stuff they've kind of moved away from. Yeah, and so it's just a lot less writes and a lot less things to write. So your size goes down, your wear goes down, all of that kind of stuff. So I actually think it's really, really cool. So because right now I'm actually running it on MySQL on a separate VM. So maybe I'll actually look at bringing it back to SQLite.
SQLite,
but
yeah. That's
right now there's no good way of migrating the data, so I don't really do a whole lot of my historical data anyway, so I'll probably just kill it and move it over. So
it's interesting because I was looking at going the other way because when I started this current instance I'm running of Home Assistant, I just didn't bother hooking up to like MariaDB or anything. I just left it as default. I was like, I'll get to it later, right? But maybe I won't even bother with that anymore. I'll just leave it as it is. That's good.
Yeah.
All right. Spotify now supports podcasts, so you can, if you're listening to this on Spotify, you can copy the link to our podcast from the Spotify app and paste that as the media source in Home Assistant, and it will now play on your favorite Spotify player. So that's good.
Yeah, there you go. That's make sure to like and subscribe on Spotify and on YouTube and on all the other channels. um, ESP Home now supports pairing Bluetooth devices, which is nice because I feel like this is one of those things where it's just going to have a cascading effect of like, okay, now that you can pair Bluetooth devices, here's all the stuff we can do, right? So it's
Yeah.
that'll be cool.
Attributes of the sun entity are now available as sensors. So now you don't need to use templates to automate based on elevations or azimuth or any of that crazy stuff. Not sure how I feel about this one. I do heavily use, the attributes of the sun, but I've been able to use templates for them. I don't know. Do I want another sensor for them? Do I need another sensor? From the UI automation builder, it probably makes sense that there would be another
I think for
sensor.
the automation builder especially, it makes sense, right? Because
Yeah.
it's I'll be honest, it is a bit of a pain today if you have to pull the attributes out because again, to me that's a little more advanced,
Yep.
right? Like if I have to think about it, it's more advanced than I want to do it, right? So
No, absolutely.
I I like the direction. I actually prefer that they do that. That they go through what's it called? That it's a sensor over a attribute. Because if I don't care about it, like maybe there it creates I don't know how many sensors it creates, but maybe it creates 8 sensors. Out of those 8, I
Yeah,
want 2. Great, I'll just disable the other 6,
that's
right?
a good
Like
point. Yeah, just disable them.
so not a huge deal. I think it just makes it easier to pull. So um, yeah, just having had to build automations for a bunch of stuff based on attributes, I hated it. So
Yeah.
which is also now why I look at Node-RED too. But it's no different, right? Because it's still as part of the entity there. So it's so there are now energy and volume storage device classes. So for example, you can now start to do things like differentiate between how much energy have I consumed or how much energy is left in a battery, right? So that those are two different types of talking about energy. So that's kind of cool.
Nice. Integrations. So there are a couple of new integrations in Home Assistant. We're not going to really touch on them in this episode, though. They are sort of branded integrations. This integration is now available via this existing integration. Just white label devices that are out there. So there's a few. I think there's a couple of fireplaces that have been added as well. So go check them out. But there's no real brand new spanking integration that I've been able to see in the release notes for this one, which then brings us to our breaking changes. So of course there is the standard Z-Wave JS version bump. There's a slight schema change, so make sure you
Yep.
update that one. And Open AI Conversation. Your model has been updated to use the ChatGPT version 3.5, which is cheaper and the latest, a newer version as well. So if you were using an older version, it's automatically been upgraded as your use of that API.
Yeah. Logbook. So it'll be when when you're going through all of this, the logbook will be unavailable until the data schema migration finishes. So the script and automation traces from the previous runs of Home Assistant will be unavailable until all the background data and stuff is migrated over properly. Once the schema is migrated over. So you might see this take a little bit longer potentially, but I don't think it should be too bad.
I don't think we mentioned the favorite thing about the update to the logbook, I think, in this release is the ability now that when you rename an entity, its history is maintained. Like that always frustrated me.
Yeah,
Like I would rename an entity in Home Assistant and all of a sudden it was a brand new device, it's got no history. Now that
yeah,
remains. So
yeah, yeah.
love it. Finally, the calendar integration. The calendar create event service now enforces that a start and end date are exclusive. So this has always been part of the specification, but was not clearly documented and enforced. So, yeah, I'm guessing you can't have the start and end date exactly the same when you're creating an event through that create event service.
I think that's it.
2023.4, another great release. Yeah, really looking forward to the next release. Hopefully, there's going to be some more. I think I mentioned in the last, like, I want more of those dialogues, and they delivered. I wasn't expecting so many to be delivered, but yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think the last release was literally called Dialogues.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
but
Otherwise, I think that's it. Another
All right.
release done. Thank you very much. Speak to you soon.
Cheers.
Cheers.